One of my first definite memories goes back to the age of 6. I stood outside a penny arcade listening to an automatic piano leaping through Rubinstein's Melody in F. The peculiar jumps in the music held me rooted. To this very day, I can't hear the tune without picturing myself outside that arcade on 125th Street, standing there barefoot and in overalls, drinking it all in avidly. Days can be sunny with never a sigh. Don't need what money can buy. Birds in the trees sing their day full of song. Why shouldn't we sing along? George was a rebellious and precocious youth, generally up to no good at all times. His first title of note seems to have been roller skating champion of 7th Street, but when his mother, Rose, arranged to have an upright piano hoisted through the window into the family apartment, intending for George's older brother, Ira, to learn to play, as George later recalled, no sooner had it come through the window and been backed up against the wall than I was at the keys. I'm chipper all the day, happy with my lot. How do I get that way? Look at what I've got. I got rhythm, I got music, I got my gal who could ask for anything more. I got daisies in green pastures, I got my gal who could ask for anything more. Old man Trouble, I don't mind him, you won't find him round my door. I got rhythm, I got music, I got my gal who could ask for anything more, who could ask for anything more.
Biographer Isaac Goldberg wrote, George, then, born into one war, comes to maturity at the outbreak of another. He is born into ragtime, he evolves into jazz. The simplicity of the one and the complexity of the other form a graph of the trend in world affairs. The distance is not to be measured in years alone. It leaps from the armored cruiser to the airplane, from the crude kinetoscope of the penny and nickel arcade to the contemporary triumphs of the movie, the talkie, and television, from national naivete to international sophistication. America and George come of age together. His most influential teacher, Charles Hambitzer, wrote in a letter to his sister around the time George was 14 or 15 years old,
Dear Olive, I have a new pupil who will make his mark in music if anybody will. The boy is a genius, without a doubt. He's just crazy about music and can't wait until it's time to take his lesson. He wants to go in for this modern stuff, jazz and whatnot, but I'm not going to let him for a while. I'll see that he gets a firm foundation in the standard music first.
I'm a little jazz bird and I'm telling you to be one too. For a little jazz bird is in heaven when he's singing loud. I say it with regret, but you're out of date. You ain't heard nothing yet until you syncopate. When the going gets rough, you will find your troubles all have flown. If you warble your stuff like the moaning of a saxophone, just try my recipe, and I'm sure you'll agree that a little jazz bird is the only kind of bird to be.
In 1961, Ira Gershwin said of George, in person, my brother was a good deal like his music, vibrant, dynamic, and honest, and, if I may, charming. He was full of life and lived a full day. Although most of it was devoted to the piano and his music, it was a continual source of amazement to me that he found time to engage in so many other activities. He was a fine painter, a good golfer, a discerning and courageous art collector, an excellent photographer, a wonderful dancer, whether at a ballroom or taking a moment out of a show rehearsal to break into a tap dance. And socially, he was one of the most sought-after young men in New York, or whatever city he happened to be in. George moved fast, lived fast, and learned fast.
You're a very naughty boy. When you asked me for a kiss, I'm dismayed, a little bit afraid. Now holding hands is quite a joy for a truly modest miss. It should do just as well for you. I am not refusing you, dear. Let me make this perfectly clear. I won't say I will, but I won't say I won't. I don't say I do, but I don't say I don't. Kissing of any kind never was on my mind. Maybe I can arrange it. It's my mind and I can change it. I might say I might, but modesty forbids. That's the reason why I don't. So you mustn't be cross at a little delay. You ought to know Rome wasn't built in a day. I won't say I will, but I won't say I won't. You'd have taken your kiss if you had any cheek. Maybe I'd scream, but my voice is so weak. I won't say I will, but I won't say I won't.
Success came early to George, who took it with disarming grace, despite the many people who spoiled him by catering to him. Naturally, there were many women in his life. But with all the people, the excitement, and his absorbing interest in music, George was lonely inside himself. People didn't know him too well. He didn't let people get close to him. Ira was closest. Of all of us, it was George who first spoke of getting married and having children. He loved a home. And yet it was George who never married. I suppose there was some unconscious fear, which made it impossible for him to lose himself in a personal relationship. And of course, music came first.
I've written you a song, a beautiful routine. I hope you like it. My technique can't be wrong. I learned it from the screen. I hope you like it. I studied all the rhymes that all the lovers sing. And just for you, I wrote this little thing.
Ira Gershwin on songwriting. That certain question, which comes first? When I was on jury service in New York many years ago, there was a case found for the defendant. Afterwards, in the corridor, I saw a lawyer for the plaintiff approaching, and I thought I was going to be lectured. But no. Greetings over, all he wanted to know was whether the words or the music came first. Every songwriter has been put this question many times, and by now nearly all interested know that no rule obtains. Sometimes it's the lyric, sometimes the tune, And sometimes, more often than not these days, the words and music are written practically at the same time. This, when collaborators are at work together, in the same room that is, though I have heard of collaboration on the telephone, and a song, sparked either by possible title or by a likely snatch of tune, emerges line by line and section by section. What comes first, according to the show writers in demand, is the contract.
Blah, 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 moon. Blah, 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 above. Blah, 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 croon. Blah, 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 love. Tra-la-la-la, tra-la-la-la-la, merry month of May. Tra-la-la-la, tra-la-la-la-la, neath the clouds of gray. Blah, 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 your hair. Blah, 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 your eyes. Blah, 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 care. Blah, 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 skies. Tra-la-la, tra-la-la-la-la, cottage for two. Blah, 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 darling, with you.
Conclusion? The lyricist needn't be a musician, but if he is musically inclined, he can sometimes be of help to the composer. Not that the composer can't be of help with suggestions to the lyricist, but in my experience, alas, rarely. Really.
George's take was quite a bit different. There are so many songwriters today that if placed end to end, it wouldn't be a bad idea. This futile but perhaps sage suggestion, presented the other day by a well-known Broadway wag, is being echoed up and down the Great Blight Way, and with no little reason. Never in all our history of popular music has there been such a plethora of composers, professional, amateur, and alleged, as we have today. The merciless ether has cut down the life of a popular song to but a few weeks, with the result that anyone who thinks he can carry a tune, even if it's nowhere in particular, nowadays takes a shot at music making. After all, making music is actually little else than a matter of invention. What causes me to write is only my inventiveness, aided and abetted by emotion. I see a piece of music in the form of a design. No matter what they say about nothing new under the sun, it is always possible to invent something original. Just as a creator of fiction or of poetry, a composer of music smells symphonic ideas in every fact. To me, they are represented by both abstract and concrete ideas. Though I am a great lover of nature, none of my music comes from viewing detached scenes, no matter how beautiful or inspiring they may be. Most of my ideas arise from contact with people, from personalities and emotions of men and women I meet.
In the late 1920s, George wrote a series of essays in various publications exploring the definition of jazz and music. He opined that jazz is the spontaneous expression of the nervous energy of modern American life. The gist of his message was that people's need to organize music into neatly labeled genres seemed to get in the way of truly understanding music's relationship to humanity. He wrote, "The blatant jazz of 10 years ago, crude, vulgar, and unadorned, is passing. I realize that jazz expresses something very definite and vital in American life, but I also realize that it expresses only one element. To express the richness of that life fully, a composer must employ melody, harmony, and counterpoint, as every great composer of the past has employed them." The future lies in the composer who, without forgetting the innate impressions of his youth, can employ in their expression the full resources of the masters of the past. Beginning with crudity and vulgarity, it has gradually been freeing itself and moving towards a higher plane. At first, it was mere discord for the sake of discord, a simple reveling in animal vigor. But slowly, the meaning of that discord, its color, its power in the depiction of American sentiment has been brought to life. The discord of jazz is today no mere succession of meaningless, ugly grunts and wheezes. That these are still in there is no doubt true, but then modern life is, alas, not expressed by smooth phrases. We are living in an age of staccato, not legato. This we must accept. But this does not mean that out of this very staccato utterance, something beautiful may not be evolved.
In a letter to the editor of Singing magazine, in response to a critique that a reader had written of one of these essays, George wrote,
"The most painful thing about any discussion of jazz is the seemingly inevitable confusion of terminology. The word has been used for so many different things that it has ceased to have any definite meaning. We need a new set of words for each of these widely divergent types because much of the present discussion degenerates into mere quibbling over words and definitions. The same word trouble surrounds the colloquial use of the phrase classic music. It means as many things as there are people who say it. A man writes a piece of music which he considers serious, but which really is pretty awful. He labels his work classic, and an unsuspecting public accepts the label. From any sound critical standpoint, labels mean nothing at all. Good music is good music, even if you call it oysters. Wherever I went, I heard a concourse of sounds. Many of them were not audible to my companions, for I was hearing them in memory. Strains from the latest concert, the cracked tones of a hurdy-gurdy, the wail of a street singer, the obligato of a broken violin, past or present music, I was hearing within me. Old music and new music. Forgotten melodies and the craze of the moments, bits of opera, Russian folk songs, Spanish ballads, ragtime ditties combined in a mighty chorus in my inner ear. And through and over it all, faint at first, loud at last, the sound of this great America of ours. And what is the voice of that American soul? It is jazz, developed out of ragtime. It is all colors and all souls unified in the great melting pot of the world. Its dominant note is vibrant syncopation. I do not know what the next decade will disclose in music. No composer knows. But to be true music, it must repeat the thoughts and aspirations of the people and the time. My people are Americans. My time is today. Of tomorrow, and of my tomorrow as an interpreter of American life in music, I am sure of but one thing, that the essence of future music will hold enough of the melody and harmony of today to reveal its origin. It will be sure to have a tincture of the derided yesterday, which has been accepted today and which perhaps tomorrow will be exalted jazz.
Embrace me, my sweet embraceable you. Embrace me, you irreplaceable you. Just one look at you, my heart grew tipsy in me. You and you alone bring out the gypsy in me. I love all the many charms about you. Above all, I want my arms about you. Don't be a naughty baby. Come to Papa do. my sweet embraceable you.
Almost 30 years after they wrote Embraceable You, in his book Lyrics on Several Occasions, Ira would write, "Incidentally, the song was one of my father's favorites. Whenever possible, with company present, his request to George was, 'Play that song about me.' And when the line, 'Come to Papa, do,' was sung, he would thump his chest, look around the room, and beam."
I love all the many charms about you. Above all, I want my arms about you. Don't be a naughty baby. Come to Papa, do. My sweet embraceable you.
Did you ever feel that a composer resembled his music? I believe this can sometimes be possible. And in the case of George Gershwin, it was true. This idea first became apparent to me at a rehearsal of his Concerto in F in 1925. I had met Gershwin once, but did not know him well. The rehearsal was in Carnegie Hall, and although he did not run to the piano, he looked as though he might have liked to. Being slim, long-legged, and fast-moving, he always looked taller than his actual height. He sat erectly at the piano with no needless gestures, but with an eagerness that made the first and last movements of the concerto sound sparkling, while the slower, more wistful second movement never became too sentimental. When he rose at the end, it was apparent that the performance had given him just about the happiest experience a composer can have. To hear his composition with the realization that the sound he has heard is as close as possible to the sound he hoped for.
A Rhapsody in Rivets, one of several titles for this piece, written in 1931, while George and Ira were testing the waters in the movies, contracted to provide songs for a film called Delicious. A portion of the piece is used in the film, but George focused on it as a full-length rhapsody. Despite being written in Hollywood, it would also be called New York Rhapsody and Manhattan Rhapsody before making its concert hall debut in January of 1932 in Boston as simply Second Rhapsody.
Nearly everybody comes back from California with a Western tan and a pocket full of moving picture money. I decided to come back with both those things and a serious composition.
The inspiration of Rivets is undeniable. George felt the piece captured the energy of technology, the ever-increasing tempo of life.
The machine age has influenced practically everything. I do not mean only music, but everything from arts to finance. I do not think there is any such thing as mechanized musical composition without feeling, without emotion. Music is one of the arts which appeals directly through the emotions. Mechanism and feeling will have to go hand in hand, in the same way that a skyscraper is at the same time a triumph of the machine and a tremendous emotional experience, almost breathtaking. The more people listen to music, the more they will be able to criticize it and know when it's good. When we speak of machine-made music, however, we are not speaking of music in the highest sense, because no matter how much the world becomes a machine age, music will have to be created in the same old way. No one has found a new method in which to write music. We still use the old signatures, the old symbols. The composer has to do every bit of his work himself. Handwork can never be replaced in the composition of music. If music ever became machine-made in that sense, it would cease to be art.
The two pianos in George's apartment made it possible for us to play his music together, as it was written, for it was his custom to sketch his large works for two pianos before scoring them. The Second Rhapsody and the Cuban Overture were written in this way. There was also a great deal of singing and a sporadic stream of talk embracing prize fighting, music, painting, football, and sex. The Gershwin enthusiasm for ping pong was communicated to me, and we spent hours at the game. Once I had been admitted to George's friendship, I took so much pleasure in the things he was writing and doing that I did nothing of my own. Listening to him improvise and play was enough for me. He had such fluency at the piano and so steady a surge of ideas that any time he sat down just to amuse himself, something came of it. He got most of his ideas just by playing. Writing music was the thing he loved to do more than anything else, except perhaps to play the music he had written previously.
Kay Swift was the closest woman to George in his life. They met at a party around the time Concerto in F debuted. She was married to the banking scion, James Paul Warburg, who took the name Paul James when he wrote lyrics to Kay's songs. It was a very progressive marriage for the time, what we'd now call open. Whether or not that informed the title of their song, Can't We Be Friends, is not known, but it became a huge hit. In 1930, Kay became the first female composer to have a full musical comedy produced on Broadway, Fine and Dandy. She was a pioneer composer in what was still considered a man's field. And though she is often remembered only as George's devoted music assistant, she was a colleague, a friend, a lover. She spent decades after George's death piecing together unfinished sketches and works of his that would be published posthumously, including this arrangement of Melody No. 17, which she and Ira titled Sleepless Night. While working as a staff songwriter for Radio City Music Hall, Kay returned to George's side as he embarked on writing the score for Porgy and Bess. He'd call me and tell me to rush over to play the orchestra part of a song. He couldn't sing, neither could Ira, but we'd all sing Ira's or DuBose Hayward's lyrics, sounding like a chorus of crows. His first attempt at writing jazz for an opera about African Americans, titled Blue Monday, was described by New York World as the most dismal, stupid, and incredible blackface sketch that has probably ever been perpetrated. George read the novel Porgy when it was first published in 1925. Written by DuBose Hayward, a lifelong South Carolinian, the novel depicted a fictional neighborhood in Charleston, based on the Gullah communities he knew. Gershwin contacted him right away to gauge interest in an operatic interpretation, but Hayward's wife, Dorothy, had been working on a stage play adaptation. George held on to that idea for years and finally contacted Hayward again in 1932, beginning 2 years of long-distance correspondence and visits to Charleston to absorb the culture. George was insistent on writing it solely for African-American performers. In December of 1934, after rejecting interest from Al Jolson to portray Porgy in a film using blackface, George wrote this in a letter to Hayward.
Here's an exciting piece of news. I heard about a man singer who teaches music in Washington and arranged to have him come and sing for me on Sunday several weeks ago. In my opinion, he is the closest thing to a colored Lawrence Tibbett I have ever heard. He is about 6 feet tall and well-proportioned with a rich, booming voice. He would make a superb crown and, I think, just as good a Porgy.
I was teaching at Howard University at the time. I had heard about the new Gershwin opera, Porgy, and had no interest in it at all. But when I received a phone call from George Gershwin, well, it was pretty difficult to say no. So up to New York I went on the train one day. Look, I didn't know what he'd want to hear. I asked him to play, and he says, well, where is your accompanist? Well, I didn't know that I was supposed to pay $5 and bring an accompanist. And I said, well, can't you play? Well, he said, I play a little bit. And I said, well, if you can't play, I'll play for myself. Oh, he loved to tell that story. He used to tell it at all the parties, and he would say, I fell in love with that man then. Man, he was so honest and so true. He stopped me after 12 measures of Lungi dal Caro Bene, and he said, do you know this by memory? Of course I knew it by memory. I replied rather indignantly. He said, look straight in my eyes. Don't look anywhere else. I sang the same 12 measures, and he stopped once again, and I'm thinking, what is wrong with this man? Why won't he just let me sing this aria? And he said, will you be my porgy? Now, guess what I had the nerve to say? Look, I didn't say, yes, I'll be glad to be your porgy. I said, Mr. Gershwin, I have to hear your music first. He said, well, we can arrange that. Could you come back next week? So I thought a bit and said I could return if he could pay the train fare for both my wife and myself. Now, when he asked how much I would need, I managed a quick calculation, and knowing that the train fare was $18 and that if I asked for $25, we could also go out for sandwiches. I asked for $30 so I could have a $5 bill to stick in my pocket. And that was the beginning of an exciting time in our lives. Oh, little stars, roll, roll, roll me some light. 11 little stars, come home, come home. Roll this poor beggar a sun and a moon, a sun and a moon. Oh, no, my brother, that ain't little Joe. There is the morning and the evening stars, and just you watch 'em rise and shine for this poor beggar.
The composition of Porgy and Bess had just begun when I met George Gershwin. The Metropolitan Opera made him a generous offer. He knew that the success of his opera depended on being sung and acted by Black people, and that would have been impossible at the racist Metropolitan Opera at that time. I was still at the Juilliard School when I saw a notice in the newspaper that George Gershwin was interviewing singers, dancers, and actors, both classically trained as well as jazz musicians, for the opera he was in the process of writing. I decided to make contact with him at once. I wrote a letter to George Gershwin that same evening, and 2 days later received a phone call asking me to come for an audition. Several days later, I found myself standing in the foyer of his apartment, bending over to look under the coat rack for a place to put my boots. "What are you looking for?" he asked politely. I said without thinking, "Your roller skates." George Gershwin was quiet for a few moments, and then he laughed. He threw back his head and roared. "How did you know about my roller skates?" "Well, I read, you know." So there I was, standing beside his Steinway after having slung my wet boots under the coat rack. I sang a French aria by Massenet, several German lieder, Russian songs in English, even a Gershwin melody, and George Gershwin was full of praise. And then he asked me to sing a Negro spiritual. I said, "Why do people ask Negro singers to sing spirituals as if that is the only thing they should be singing, and not German lieder or French arias?" I was very much on the defensive. He simply looked long at me and he said, "Uh-huh, I understand." And I realized that he did understand. And I wanted more than anything else to sing a spiritual for him. How dumb I had been. Wasn't this to be an opera about Negroes? I didn't bring any accompaniment for a spiritual, I said, but I could sing one without accompaniment if you would like. "Oh, yes, please do," he said. So I sang a spiritual, A City Called Heaven. And when I finished, I knew that I had never sung it better, nor would I ever sing it better. Instead of the half hour I had expected to be there, I stayed nearly 2 hours. George played as much of Porgy as had been written, including Summertime, with which I was completely fascinated. He sang all the parts himself, and then he asked me to sing Summertime. It was not a difficult melody, and it just rolled out of my throat. And then I went home.
The next weekend, we went up to New York. At the theater, we met some foppish man in striped pants whom I took an instant dislike to. Going up in the lift together, he asked, "Who are you? Are you going to George's?" And I said, yes, we are. To which he replied, "Well, you better be damned good. George has made us all come out of the country to come hear this new genius he's just found. The entire theater guild board will be here today, so you'd better be good. Damn good." Well, I was. And I sang even more beautifully that day because I was so mad at that unpleasant man. And I sang a lot for those people: opera, lieder, French songs, Negro spirituals. And then we ate while George and Ira talked about the opera. Now, we were sitting everywhere, on chairs, couches, and on pillows, and on the floor, when he started out with the opening, with imitating the trumpets with his voice. And I said to myself, "Oh my God, gee, this is junk." And Ira, with his rotten voice, starts Summertime. And the living is easy. And George looked up at me and smiled. But when he got to the second verse, I could have wept. Well, this is so beautiful. Where did this man get this from? I just couldn't get over it. And then he went into the next part where Porgy's theme enters. It was like the royal gates had opened. And he had me hooked. Hooked from then on.
He would personally call sometimes and say, "Annie, I've just finished the music for Clara. I want you to come and sing it for me." This went on week after week. Sometimes others were there, but more often just George Gershwin. And we sang different songs and duets and trios as soon as the ink was dry on the page. And then one day, George Gershwin said, "Annie, how would you like to sing the role of Bess?" I had suspected for some time that he would just say that. Even so, it came as a big surprise. I answered quickly and gave him a big hug. Then I asked him, "What will you do if the Theater Guild insists on engaging another singer for the Bess role?" "They'll have to do it over my dead body," he said. "Don't worry, Annie. George Gershwin will have the last word." Shortly after rehearsal had begun, George invited me to have lunch with him at a little cafe across from the Alvin Theater. He told me with a very serious face that the opera by George Gershwin would henceforth be known as Porgy and Bess. He also told me that he had changed the last act at my request. "From the beginning, you have harassed me to find a place for Bess to sing Summertime. I've decided to let you sing your favorite melody. It's very logical. I don't know why I didn't think of it before." "Are you happy now, Miss Brown?" he said. I wouldn't allow myself to cry in front of him, so I said nothing.
It was a wonderful cast, highly trained, highly educated. Of course, Bubbles, he didn't read music at all, had to learn everything by rote. Now, Bubbles was an important entertainer, a big draw, so Gershwin taught him to dance his part, taught him everything, all the notes, all the rhythms, all the cues with his feet. It was brilliant. And when he learned to dance it, he never made a mistake after that.
The opening in Boston was spectacular. And remember, this was the full 4-hour version. The response from the audience was tremendous. An ovation, some people said, lasted almost a half an hour. Only the critics argued about the work's form, whether it was an opera or musical or even a folk opera, as Gershwin called it. I remember so well that day when we had the first full orchestra rehearsal of the finished opera with soloist and chorus on the stage of Carnegie Hall, when the echoes of the last chords of Porgy and Bess had disappeared into the nearly empty hall. We were, all of us, in tears. It had been so moving. Todd Duncan turned to me and said, "Do you realize, Anne, that we are making history?" George Gershwin stood on the stage as if in a trance for a few moments. Then, seeming to awaken, he said, "This music is so wonderful, so beautiful that I can hardly believe that I have written it myself."
Oh, I got plenty of nothing, and nothing's plenty for me. I got no car, got no mule, I got no misery. There folks with plenty of plenty got a lock on their door. Afraid somebody's going to rob them. What is out there making more? What for? I got no lock on the door, that's no way to be. They can steal the rug from the floor. That's okay with me, 'cause the things that I prize, like the stars in the skies, all are free. Oh, I got plenty of nothing, and nothing's plenty for me. I got my gal, got my song, got heaven the whole day long. No use complaining. Got my gal, got my Lord, got my song. Oh, I got plenty of nothing, and nothing's plenty for me. I got my gal, got the moon, got the deep blue sea. There folks with plenty of plenty got to pray all the day. Seems with plenty, you sure got to worry how to keep that devil away. Away. I ain't fretting about hell till the time arrives. Never worry long as I'm well. Never one to strive to be good, to be bad. What the hell? I is glad I was alive. Oh, I got plenty of nothing, and nothing's plenty for me. I got my gal, got my song, got heaven the whole day long. No use complaining. Got my gal, got my Lord, got my song.
K-Swift was devastated when George allowed nearly a quarter of the score to be cut between Boston and New York. Toward the end of the Boston run, sitting with George in the back of the Colonial Theater, he said to her, "Someday, Kay, you'll sit in that same seat and you'll hear what I wrote. I promise you." Indeed, the next time she would hear the opera in its entirety would be 40 years later, when the 1976 Houston Grand Opera production played the Colonial Theater. She made a point of reserving that same seat in the back.
It was magical, yet very suddenly, the magic was over. On tour, the minute I read the itinerary, I said, "Well, I'm not going to sing at the National Theater in Washington. It's a segregated theater. I can remember as if it were yesterday that the other member said, "You can't refuse. Who do you think you are? This is your first experience on the stage and you think you can say where you will sing and where you will not? You'll be blacklisted for the rest of your career." And I said, "I don't give a damn. I'll do something else. I don't have to sing. I'm not going to sing in Washington." George Gershwin came over that same evening and he asked, "Did you really say that?" "Yes. I won't sing. Not even your opera. I won't sing in the National Theater." The policy was changed for that 1 week. The following week, Ethel Waters appeared there in a play, and the policy was the original one. No blacks were allowed. And it was 20 years before it changed, and 50 years before the opera was presented at the Metropolitan.
I love singing the role of Porgy. It seems that the Porgies that I've heard, that when they sing I Got Plenty of Nothing, they think it's a buffoon song or a black-faced step and fetch it song. It's not that at all. It is a very deep philosophy, and I got it from the composer himself. It is making fun of very wealthy white people. I got this from George Gershwin's own mouth when he said to me, "Todd, this is a bitter song, and you have to sing it with tongue-in-cheek. You have to sing it smiling all the time, because what you're doing is making fun of us. You're making fun of people who make money and to whom power and position is very important." Oh man, we just labored over these words. Gershwin told me, and the point is this: the things that I prize are not money, not power, not being president, not having an army, or not having a great big automobile. The things that I prize are the stars, and the sun, and the moon. So, you have just told the audience what really is important to the composer, to the lyricist, and to Porgy. And also to me, Todd Duncan, as an artist, as a Negro man. It became my credo. See, I got love, and I got God, and I got my song. I own them. I own the moon and the seas, and there are a lot of people on this earth that don't even own or appreciate them. They don't plant beautiful flowers. They don't even enjoy flowers. They don't even look at the flowers. Well, Porgy did.
The night of the New York premiere, Kay had arranged an astonishing party at Condé Nast's personal penthouse palace high above the city. She later recalled, "We hired Paul Whiteman's orchestra. All the men were in white tie and tails. It was not until 7 a.m. that we all got to bed." Later that morning, she would be a guest at the Curtis Institute in Philadelphia, delivering the very first lecture on Porgy and Bess, playing the musical examples herself from memory on the piano. Kay and George felt stronger about each other than ever, but their love remained elusive. Just a couple of months after the opening of Porgy and Bess, RKO in Los Angeles extended a contract to the Gershwin brothers. Kay and George decided they'd be wise to use the months he was away as a sort of break to see where they stood at the end of it. We said goodbye, and he walked up the ramp. And I knew for sure I'd never see him again. I don't know why, but I knew that was all. That was it. Our romance won't end on a sorrowful note, though by tomorrow you're gone. The song is ended, but as the songwriter wrote, the melody lingers on. They may take you from me, I'll miss your fond caress, but though they take you from me, I'll still
roses. The way you wear your hat, the way you sip your tea, the memory of all that. No, no, they can't take that away from me. The way your smile just beams, the way you sing off key, the way you haunt my dreams. No, no, they can't take that away from me. We may never, never meet again on the bumpy road to love. Still, I'll always, always keep the memory of the way you hold your knife, the way we danced till 3, the way you changed my life. No, no, they can't take that away from me. No, they can't take that away from me.
The last music George wrote in his life was Love Is Here to Stay in 1937. After his death that summer at the age of 38, in his composition notebook, the tune remained unfinished. Oscar Levant remembered the rest of the melody and completed it on the page. Vernon Duke helped Ira notate music for a verse Ira created, and Duke would later try to claim authorship. Ira's defense was that anyone could see the verse was so undistinguished that it should be obvious he'd written it himself.
The more I read the papers, the less I comprehend the world and all its capers, and how it all will end. Nothing seems to be lasting, but that isn't our affair. We've got something permanent, at least in the way we care. It's very clear our love is here to stay, not for a year, but ever and a day. The radio and the telephone and the movies that we know may just be passing fancies, and in time may go. But oh my dear, our love is here to stay. Together we're going a long, long way. In time the Rockies may crumble, Gibraltar may stumble, they're only made of clay. But our love is here to stay.
Our friend wrote music And in that mold, he created gaiety and sweetness and beauty. And 24 hours after he had gone, his music filled the air and in triumphant accents proclaimed to this world of men that gaiety and sweetness and beauty do not die. A genius differs from other men only in that his immortality is tangible. What he thought, what he felt, what he meant has been crystallized in a form of expression, a form far sturdier than the flesh and sinew of the man. But lesser beings than geniuses leave their marks upon this earth, and it is as a lesser being that George Gershwin's friends knew him and loved him. We remember a young man who remained naive in a sophisticated world. We remember a smile that was nearly always on his face, a cigar that was nearly always in his mouth. He was a lucky young man, lucky to be so in love with the world, and lucky because the world was so in love with him. It endowed him with talent. It endowed him with character. And rarest of all things, it gave him a complete capacity for enjoying all his gifts. It was a standing joke with us that George would not be dragged away from a piano. He loved to play the piano, and he played well, and he enjoyed his own playing. How glad we are now that some divine instinct made him snatch every precious second he could get at that keyboard, made him drink exultantly of his joy-giving talent, made him crowd every grain of gratification he could get into his short, blessed life. Maybe the greatest thing he left us is this lesson. Maybe we take the good things of life too much for granted. Maybe we took George too much for granted. We loved him. Should we not have loved him more? Have we ever loved him so much as we do now? Have we ever said so as we do now? We are all inadequate, muddling humans, with hearts and minds woefully unequipped to solve the problems that beset us. We are eloquent in the recognition of our troubles. Why are we not eloquent in the recognition of our blessings, as George was? Some will want a statue erected for him. He deserves this. Some will want to endow a school of music in his name. He deserves this. But his friends could add one more tribute in his honor. They could try to appreciate and be grateful for the good things in this world in his honor. They could try to be kinder to one another. And this would be the finest monument of all.